Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Isaiah. We are in chapter 20. Chapter 20 is a fairly short passage. And when we come to chapter 20, I just want to draw your attention that every time you look into the book of Isaiah, please remember that Isaiah is not in a consecutive historical narrative. They are in a series of prophecies, a series of visions, a series of messaging from God to Isaiah. And it talks about different things along the way. And because of that, you cannot say that chapter 19 comes before chapter 20. Yes, it is in the context, but it is not about one prophecy before another prophecy. So that we need to be clear. And so each prophecy actually does a stand alone. Now, in chapter 20, it's regarding Assyria again. So, in the year that Tartan, now Tartan in this case is possibly a general come to Ashdod, and Ashdod is in the land of Judea, right? The Judah territory. When Sargon, the king of Assyria, sent him. Now, Sargon is possibly the father of Sennacherib. And we're talking about a, a possible 3 years before Sennacherib came against Hezekiah, the king of Judah. So this is an actual prophecy with regards to the time of Judah after the northern kingdom has been deposed by Shalmaneser. And he fought against Ashdod and took it. At the same time, the Lord spoke by Isaiah, the son of Amoz. And this is a prophecy, and it is directed to Isaiah. And you find that there are some very peculiar words being said. He says, "Go and remove the sackcloth from your body and take off your sandals off your feet." And he did so walking naked and barefoot. Sounds very humiliating, in fact. So the translation might be a bit of a challenge here. And so it says that go and this word here is not remove the sackcloth from your body. It can be explained as girding, gird a sackcloth over your loins. He is semi-naked in that sense, loose sackcloth, and the idea of sackcloth is that it is a symbol of mourning. And why is this a symbol of mourning? Is that this indicates the time after the northern kingdom has been deposed. It's a very sad situation that the northern kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes, has been taken away by the previous king of Assyria. And in this idea, Isaiah is supposed to wander around in a symbol of reminder to the southern kingdom of what happened to the northern kingdom brethren. So he is to go around with a sackcloth over his body, and he is barefoot. So take your sandals off your feet. And so this idea of naked, I would use the term in modern day semi-naked. Now, what does that mean? It means that his top part is naked, but he is covering his loins. Right? He is not really walking around totally naked in that sense. It would be terribly humiliating for Isaiah. And then God said this, just as my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot 3 years for a sign and a wonder against Egypt and Ethiopia. Now, understand a couple of things here. First of all, Isaiah is given this connotation servant. It is a person who obeys the master. And in this case, the master is God himself. And he listened to God to walk naked, and in this case, just covering his loins and barefoot for 3 years. And this in itself is about the loss of Israel. The northern kingdom was a total loss. But in this case, as a total loss of Israel by the clothing or the lack of clothing that Isaiah is supposed to wear, God is saying that this is for a sign. Now, understand this. Every time you see the word sign, it is visible. It is to teach a lesson. It is a visible indication, right? Number one. Number two, this is a wonder. Now, this word wonder, uh, I think you can see it as a miracle. So there is a visible sign that indicates a certain message right here. And then it is a miracle, something that people don't expect to happen. And this is now directed as a sign towards Egypt, Mitzrayim, basically. That's the ancient word, Mitzrayim. And then Ethiopia. Now, this is a modern translation. I wouldn't use the word Ethiopia because you might think that it's today's Ethiopia in Africa. This would be Cush. Cush is actually south of Mitzrayim, south of Egypt, and in the Sudan area and towards the Gulf of Suez on the side. And it's really a, a place between two very large nations. Now, understand this, we don't hear much about Egypt and Cush. The reason is that Egypt and Cush, at the time Isaiah was writing this, as God was talking to them, both Mitzrayim, Egypt, and Cush were very large nations. They were two kingdoms, basically. Unfortunate for ourselves today, we hardly hear of them. So ancient Egypt was a magnificent kingdom, and we find Cush as well as a magnificent kingdom. And the southern kingdom of Judah was expecting Mizraim and Cush to come to their defense when the Assyrians will come to attack them. Now, that's the wish and hope of Judah. But God is saying, my servant Isaiah, who has shown invisible view of the people walking naked and barefoot for 3 years, they should now be able to see that this is a sign and a miracle against Egypt and Cush, that although people don't think that they can be crushed by any other nation, they will be. And so we read in verse 4, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptians as prisoners, and the Ethiopians, now understand this would be Cush, not Ethiopia, as captives, young and old, naked and barefoot, with their buttocks uncovered, and this is humiliation, to the shame of Egypt. Now, what is happening in verse 4? We need to be very clear that while Judah was expecting Mizraim, Egypt, and Cush to come to their assistance when the king of Assyria comes down upon the land of Judah, God is saying that the king of Assyria will actually destroy the Egyptians. They would take them as prisoners, young and old. They will also come down far south to the kingdom of Cush, and they too will be captured. Now we read some of these events, and if you go back, and that would be in Second Kings, I think Second Kings chapter 19, when Cush comes against the Assyrians, they were practically destroyed. When the Egyptians eventually go against the Assyrians, they too were destroyed. And so it is very important that we understand this. Now, this event here is Second Kings 18 as well. So understand that all of these are eventually the events that will happen that God is predicting that will happen to both Egypt and Cush, which means that the kingdom of Judah, after seeing the kingdom of Israel being captured and taken away, they were hoping to have friends with the Egyptians and the Cushites. These two mega kingdoms will also be taken away by the king of Assyria. Right? This is an important element to remember. So this prophecy is really to tell the kingdom of Judah, you can't depend on your friends, your neighbor friends of Egypt and Cush. Then they shall be afraid and ashamed of Cush, not Ethiopia, their expectation, and Egypt, their glory. Now, who is they? In this case, it's Judah. People of Judah shall be afraid and ashamed because now they cannot depend on Egypt and Cush because they too would be destroyed and captured by the Assyrians. And the inhabitants of this territory, that would be Judah, will say in that day, surely such our expectation, wherever we run away for help to be delivered from the king of Assyria, no one can actually help them. And this would be the conclusion of chapter 20. It says, how shall we escape? The idea of escape here is to, I guess you could say, be delivered from the Assyrians. Now, this is important because in chapter 20, it is to show how futile the thinking of Judah is. Now, what is the main lesson here that God is teaching the people of Judah? That at the end of the day, the only one that they can depend on is God Himself. Well, in their minds, they could call upon their mighty neighbors of Egypt and Cush. They too will be first conquered by Assyrians, and then finally, the Assyrians will come against Judah, and that will really put the terror and fear into the people. Now, when we come to the time of Hezekiah in a later chapter, you find that the number of Assyrian army that was amassed to come against Judah was 185,000. That number is uncountable. And that is why it puts the fear into every nation around Israel. And so Israel becomes isolated because everyone around Judah would have been conquered by the Assyrians, and then finally, the Assyrians will make their approach to Judah. Now, this is the conclusion of chapter 20. They cannot trust anyone except God Himself. We come to chapter 21. So, very quickly, I want to show you that this is the prophecy against the wilderness of the west. And this is Babylon. Now, what happens is that if you know the land of Babylon, you find that you have Persia here, and you have Madai, or the Medes, right? Madai or Medes, and you have Babylon. Now, the Assyrians will be on top, and they would have gone away by this time. So we're now looking at a prophecy that is with regards to Babylon. Now, what is going to happen to Babylon eventually is that you find that they are going to be the west of the lands of Madai and Persia. And together they will come against Babylon in a Medo-Persian army. And this is the prophecy. Now, understand that Babylon is never thought of a kingdom that can be ever destroyed. Babylon eventually comes up as a kingdom that is so powerful that they are second to none. Nobody in their right mind would ever think that anyone would be able to conquer Babylon. But this is the prophecy. As whirlwinds in the south pass through, it comes from the desert, from a terrible land. A distressing vision is declared to me, that is to Isaiah. The treacherous dealer deals treacherously, and the plunderers plunder. So, what does that mean? It tells us that it was at a time when the Babylonians betrayed their friends and they will be betrayed. Go up, O Elam, go up, O Media, all its sighing I have made to cease. So these are words that talks about Persia and Madai, which is Medes. And so this intent is that Babylon will be met by the attacks of Medo-Persia, right? Medo-Persia. And so understand that in chapter 21, there are a few prophecies, a few visions, but this is very distressing. It is a hard vision. It is something that is going to calm down, to shock everyone. So you need to think with me that Babylon, being with Nebuchadnezzar, an incredible kingdom who came to take over the entire world at that time, can actually suddenly lose control. That is why it is distressing. Therefore, my loins are filled with pain. Pangs have taken hold of me like the pangs of a woman in labor. I was distressed when I heard it. I was dismayed when I saw it. What does it mean? It means that Isaiah thinks that it is totally unbelievable. He cannot understand how this can ever happen. My heart wavered, fearfulness frightened me. The night for which I longed, he turned into fear for me. It says, prepare the table, set a watchman in the tower, eat, drink, arise, you princes, anoint the shield. This is talking about Babylon. Babylon is oblivious. They are unknowing. Unknowing to there are two powers that is sitting east of them that will actually come one day to conquer them. For thus the Lord said to me, that's Isaiah, go set a watchman, let him declare what he sees. So this is really to watch for the dangers that will come in towards Babylon. Now, watch what is being said. He saw a chariot with a pair of horsemen. A pair means two, right? This is in verse 7. So it's important for us to see. Now, this idea of two is a span, it's a couple. It literally tells us this, a team of animals. And in this case, specifically two. So the way that the text is written is this, a chariot of donkeys and a chariot of camels. I think it is important for us to note that it is singular. It means that you have a chariot and one is a donkey and the other being a camel. And that is how this is expressed. We have a camel and we have a donkey. And this is the way the chariot is presented. One donkey, one camel, pulling the chariot with a pair of horsemen. And he listened earnestly with great care. Now, that really tells us there is Medo, the Medes, and Persia. That's what these are the kingdoms that's coming against Babylon. Then he cried, a lion, my lord. The watchman is seeing the camel and donkey coming, and I stand continually on the watchtower in the daytime and set in my post every night. And here comes a chariot of men with a pair of horsemen. And then he answered and said, and this is the shocking revelation. Babylon is fallen, is fallen. All the carved images of her gods he has broken to the ground. The dependence on idols is futile. So Babylon is fallen, and it's because of the pair of horsemen. That would be the Medo-Persian army. And it says, oh, my threshing and the grain of my floor, that which I have heard from the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I have declared to you. And this is towards Babylon. Now, this is indeed shocking. Now, shocking means not expected at all. And later, when you understand how Cyrus came against the kingdom of Babylon and took Babylon without a fight, and that is how shocking that how Babylon fell without a fight. And that is also recorded in history, and we find it in the stele of Cyrus as well. This is the next prophecy, the burden or the prophecy against Duma. And this is typically understood as Edom. And by Edom, we understand this as Rome. Now, we see this as the consecutive kingdoms that came against Israel. And I would draw your attention, if you had the chance to read Daniel chapter 2. Right? Daniel chapter 2, the Nebuchadnezzar's dream of a metallic image where you see that there is a head that is Babylon, and then Medo-Persia, and then Greece, and then Rome. Now, all of these are successive kingdoms that will come upon each other, replacing each other. And so Duma really speaks about Edom. He calls me out of Seir, watchman, what of the night, watchman, what of the night. Now, the idea of night is likely to see the problems of destruction. And so day would be deliverance. So the watchman says the morning comes and also the night. If you inquire, return, come back. And so this idea of return, come back needs us to understand this. The idea of return is shuv, which is to repent. And come back is to go back to where they are. So what happens is this. There will be destruction towards Judah. And then morning comes, there will be deliverance. And then also the night, again, destruction. And so Edom is going to apply a destruction against Judah. And then there will be deliverance. And then there will be destruction. So Judah is going to be seeing a lot of destruction and deliverance in the hands of the Roman Empire, both the ancient Roman Empire and the revived Roman Empire. And that it would be how this passage up to verse 12 would be understood. And the only time that could see any deliverance would be when Israel or Judah repents and comes back to God. And that would be how this passage could be understood. Now in verse 13 really is the third prophecy, right? It's a third prophecy. And this time it's against Arabia. And the idea of Arabia, we would find that the name here would be Araf. Now, Arabia in Hebrew is Araf. It is pronounced as Araf. But in the literal rendering or transliteration of the language, it is Arab, but pronounced as a V at the end, Araf, and this is Arabia. And it says, in the forest of Arabia, you will lodge, O you traveling companies of Didonites. These are people who are traveling tradesmen. O inhabitants of the land of Tema, all these are Ishmaelites. Bring water to him who is thirsty. With the bread they met him who fled. They are running away. And the Arabs are supposed to take care of those who flee, because these people fled from the swords, from the drawn sword, from the bent bow, from the distress of war. So they are running away from war. And in their running away from war as refugees, they are supposed to take care of the traveling companies of Dedan and Tamar. Verse 16, for thus the Lord has said to me. Now, all of these statements, thus the Lord has said to me, is an establishment that God actually spoke to Isaiah. And Isaiah is writing about it. It says, within a year, according to the year of a hired man. Now, understand this. The hired man works a year. And the year is 12 months. So within a year, within 12 months, and the hired hand up here, we see this as an A and a B. So a year is the year of the hired man, and the man who is paid to work for 12 months will not work a 13th month because he won't be paid. then all the glory of Kedar will fail. It says here, within a year, the Arabs will lose the war, and the remainder of the number of archers, the mighty men of the people of Kedar, will be diminished to zero. Eventually, all the fighting men will be gone. And this one says, the Lord of God of Israel has spoken it. And this is a harsh prophecy against the people of Arabia. And we have seen then three prophecies in this chapter. Now, each of these prophecies are short. They're basically telling some major events, but all these major events have something to do with Israel or Judah. Now, depending on the frame or the context, we have now come to the point where the northern kingdom has been deposed and only the southern kingdom is there. And chapter 20 tells us that who can they depend on? They cannot depend on the neighbors. Chapter 21, three harsh prophecies, right, against Babylon, against against Babylon, and against Duma, which would be Rome, and the third one is against Arabia. Uh, and most of the time, many people don't read these passages because it doesn't ring much of a bell. These passages were important at the time where uh, Isaiah was receiving it and speaking it towards the then kingdoms. Understand, Mitzrayim, Egypt, Cush, Arabia or Araf, Duma, all of these had not come up or has not been diminished yet. And so that's why it's a prophecy at that time. Today, when we look back, we don't see the greatness in these kingdoms. But at that time, these kingdoms had a place in that part of history. Now, with this, we've come to the end of our session today.